So this video may not be applicable to all of you. It certainly won't be applicable to those of you who did not come from a family of origin where there was a narcissistic parent. And it will not be applicable to those of you who came from that special hell of having two narcissistic parents. This is a unique video that is for those of you who had one clearly narcissistic parent and another parent that was not. And we're going to get into the complexities of that in a moment, but that's who that's for. This video is for. And for those of you in this situation, we're going to call them the not narcissistic parent. This is for those of you who were the golden child of that not narcissistic parent. And this is very complicated. In many ways, it's just as complicated as having a narcissistic parent or being the golden child of a narcissistic parent. Your not narcissistic parent can be many things. They may be someone who's healthy and engaged with you and a person with whom you had a secure attachment. They may have been, for a significant chunk of your childhood, over-focused on your narcissistic parent. So while you may have experienced them as a loving parent those times that they were around, you also know that there were times they were busy and preoccupied with managing and appeasing the narcissistic parent. So that might have meant that you often felt abandoned or not seen, or they were simply not available to you, or they'd quickly drop what they were doing to go attend to that parent. You may have had the experience of that not narcissistic parent sometimes getting mad at you when your behavior was something that parent knew would put the narcissistic parent on edge. And it would hurt almost coming more from the not narcissistic parent. You might have always had that sort of perception of threat with the narcissistic parent, but it might have stung even more hearing it from the parent who was not narcissistic. Your not narcissistic parent may have been struggling with some big stuff themselves. They may have been depressed. They may have been very anxious or had other issues that were likely made worse by being in this narcissistic relationship. But either way, in almost all cases, the not narcissistic parent was likely a parent you appreciated having and maybe often wanted more time with. Now, a pattern that many children in this situation fall into, especially if you're an empathic child, and especially if you are in other larger narcissistic family roles, such as you were the fixer or rescuer or peacekeeper, you may have been acutely focused on protecting this not narcissistic parent, trying to run interference between them and the narcissistic parent, of being extremely helpful to lighten your not narcissistic parent's load, keeping siblings out of the way. You become a parent and adult of sorts, even though you may not be at all developmentally prepared for that role. And you may also find yourself in the role of having to comfort them or having to listen to them share their woes and sadnesses and worries. So while we generally think of the roles as being the narcissistic parent's game, it is quite conceivable that a child can become the golden child of the not narcissistic parent. And what most likely happens is that this is a child who may have a different family role due to the demands of the narcissistic family system. For example, like I said, being the fixer or the rescuer or the peacekeeper. You're the child who takes on one of the more doing, fixing, make it better kinds of roles, right? You may become rather invaluable to a parent who is already overwhelmed and heartbroken and experiencing all the stuff of narcissistic abuse. Or you might have even have been that truth seer / truth teller child who was willing to commiserate and even actively call out the narcissistic parent together amongst yourselves, not to the narcissistic parent's face. Or at a minimum, your non-narcissistic parent doesn't feel gaslighted by you if you were the truth seer or the truth teller. So to be that golden child of the not narcissistic parent can be very complex. At some level, it does mean that you are a source of comfort for a parent for whom you have very complicated feelings. You love them, you wish you had more time with them, but you may also witness them giving the best of themselves to your narcissistic parent, which you may resent and may not even register it as resentment. Or you may be having a really nice time with them and then boom, you lose them as soon as the narcissistic parent comes home. The child in a narcissistically abusive family is brilliant, because they have to be, brilliant at quickly attempting to make sense of the situation in a way that allows the parents to remain good in their eyes, and perhaps the child shifts to viewing themselves as asking for too much, or that they were lucky to get the amount of time that they did get from the not narcissistic parent, and not necessarily sort of registering that they felt let down, usually, not always, by that not narcissistic parent. And you recognize that time with your not narcissistic parent is fleeting, and that you also feel compelled to protect that parent. And you could easily spend an entire childhood in a state of hypervigilance for that parent. All of this can make you a sort of golden child for that not narcissistic parent, the sort of special one, the one who looks out for them. It may not be that sort of precarious pedestal that happens when you're the narcissistic parent's golden child, that you know that you could be knocked off of at any time if you don't do and be the way that the narcissistic parent wants. Instead, when you're the golden child of the not narcissistic parent, you're the good kid, doing the right thing. And the challenge, though, is still that this could be a very one-sided relationship, because ultimately a child is not supposed to be a parent's shrink or life coach or butler. The child is supposed to be a child. And when that child feels as though they are the golden child, or sort of the chosen one of a parent that's already struggling, and a parent that they really do value, it can compel them and reward that child to keep that sort of be a perfect, get it all done kid shtick going, and keep helping that not narcissistic parent and keep running interference. And sadly, that means it actually is one more space where the child is subjugated, but in a different way. While the not narcissistic parent may not actively be subjugating the child and using them for supply and the like, and certainly not actively invalidating the child's needs, or manipulating them, or gaslighting them, or vacillating between praising and punishing them, the not narcissistic parent is still probably leaning on that child more than they should. And we can have empathy for that, because that not narcissistic parent may be grateful for a port in the storm, even though it's a child. That not narcissistic parent may actually need the help. They may have nowhere else to turn. And it may also contribute to an interesting trauma-bonded pattern, whereby when you're with that not narcissistic parent, it actually might be fun and even joyous. And then that not narcissistic parent withdraws and disappears when the narcissistic other parent comes along. So you get into a different cycle of sort of craving those pleasant times with that parent, but knowing that they are at best hoarded, stolen moments that the narcissistic parent's presence will steal again. The fantasy is to be with this not narcissistic parent all the time for the child, or just have more uninterrupted time with them. And perhaps even the fantasy is that the narcissistic parent just disappears, or at least is gone for a while. But when it shifts there, the child may even feel guilty about thinking or feeling that about one of their parents, wishing that the other parent wasn't around. But in some cases, the golden child of the not narcissistic parent may ask their not narcissistic parent to leave, get divorced from the narcissistic parent. But the child obviously may not understand the vagaries of family court and their not narcissistic parents' own trauma-bonded patterns. Being this golden child of the not narcissistic parent can make separation and individuation, basically that idea of becoming or having permission to slowly evolve into your own person as you get older, more difficult. You may feel more beholden to this parent, as though you have to keep protecting this parent and you may feel guilty or duty bound as though it's a job and you have to keep doing it. It can make it harder to go out into the world and do your own thing, or certainly move away, or even get into a relationship. And all of this can happen even if the not narcissistic parent is really healthy or saying out loud, please don't worry about me. Again, it's like a different form of trauma bonding where you still hold on to the ties and that sense of responsibility for that parent. And pleasing will become a dynamic in many, if not most, relationships going forward. And that is going to be a difficult cycle to break. And you might find yourself chronically in relationships where you're hyper-monitoring and making sure everyone's okay. And being the golden child of the not narcissistic parent can also put you in the crosshairs of the narcissistic parent, who may view your loyalty and helpfulness and protection and insistence at being with the non-narcissistic parent as a sort of lack of loyalty to them, as you being in the way. And if it's a mom and a son, and the son is the one who's being protective, there might be a mockery of calling that son a mama's boy, and could put a person who's in the role most commonly of not only being a fixer in the family system, now you're a scapegoat with the narcissistic parent and a golden child with the not narcissistic parent. So again, you could see how this could even take these trauma bonded patterns and make them worse. And you're having to protect the non-narcissistic parent from the narcissistic parent can be perceived as a sort of a behavior that evokes shame in the narcissistic parent. So then, guess what happens? Of course, the narcissistic parent will rage at you, and for a child, it's an impossible juggling act. If you are fortunate, even if you're the golden child of the not narcissistic parent, that parent is healthy enough to let you go. If you are really lucky, that healthier parent actually gets out of the narcissistic relationship, and now you may actually look forward to having more time with them uninterrupted, and they let you go and you live your life and get to have a healthy relationship with them. However, luck does not seem to favor people from these kinds of family systems, and in some cases, the long-term narcissistic abuse may have really affected the non-narcissistic parent in ways that still leave you feeling that you need to care for them and be there for them and help them and listen to them. And that would be there whether they stay or leave the narcissistic marriage. You'll see that this parent still ruminates about it. And you may get caught in the middle of listening to their laundry list of regrets. You may find yourself still having to be the one to manage and take care of this not narcissistic parent, while your siblings, who may not have been the golden child of this not narcissistic parent, can't be bothered. So you might find that you're disproportionately carrying that load. If your not narcissistic parent stays in the relationship with your narcissistic parent, you may well into adulthood find yourself having to keep an eye on or sort of take care of the non-narcissistic parent, or at least feel compelled to continue to protect them from the narcissistic parent's ongoing bad behavior. And if both of these parents live a long time, you may get pulled into horrifically triangulated elder care stuff. And trust me, ultimately that's going to make you age faster than them. In a way, when you are the golden child of the not narcissistic parent, you were sorting through two different trauma-bonded landscapes. The shifting between good and bad, or bad and worse, that keeps you doubting yourself, that happened with the narcissistic parent, and then the wanting to have more time with a parent whom you enjoyed, that often gets taken away, and the wanting to be able to keep the attention or have that time keep going of that healthier parent before they get pulled into the mess of the narcissistic parent. Other siblings who aren't in this golden child role may have a far less idealized view of the non-narcissistic parent and may have their own anger at that parent for not being stronger in the face of the narcissistic parent, for not consistently being there for all of you, and even perceive that not narcissistic parent as being weak. It can leave you as the golden child of the non-narcissistic parent in a very lonely position, often defending that not narcissistic parent, but still having to slowly acknowledge that you felt let down by them, and then simultaneously feeling responsible for them. It's very, very complicated, and it can foreshadow a long-term throughout your adult life drive to step up and take responsibility for other people in other harmful relationships, sort of forever feeling like you have to be the helper and the rescuer and being the advocate for other people, but then also either watching them get pulled back into these relationships and having to be the grown-up and the eternal helper. It's a unique role, being the golden child of the not narcissistic parent, which I have no doubt that some of you had and took on. And ultimately, it is as limiting as any of the roles in a narcissistic family, but it actually can bring out much stronger feelings of guilt and duty and obligation. Thanks again.